bracero program, which refers to the labor contract agreement between Mexico and the United States of 1942, is a story of both exclusion and inclusion, but also the pursuit of economic and social opportunity. The infamous American dream has circulated throughout the globe, citing the United States as the land for a guarantee of economic and social opportunity. It is this social construct that has taken root in the minds of both mainstream dominant society, as well as the minds of countless Mexican workers who are in search of economic mobility and social legitimacy. By looking at the history of the 1942 bracero program, it becomes evident that the social construction of the American dream not only greatly contributed to Mexican participation in the labor contract program, but also their battle for social legitimacy and acceptance in a country they literally assisted in building with their own two hands. This is their story. The 1940s in the U.S. marked an economic shift, where U.S. involvement in World War II led to a huge labor shortage in the agricultural sector. In August of 1942, the two governments of Mexico and the United States made an official agreement on the creation of the Mexican labor program. The program would be better known as the bracero program, receiving its name from the Spanish word for arm, brazo. Through the bracero program, Mexican workers were literally imported back and forth at the will of U.S. companies. Labor recruitment centers throughout the Southwest would certify the need and place an order for the braceros at a reception center. This department would then recruit braceros predominantly from the interior of Mexico. Recruiters would then bring braceros to the center and contract them to individual farmers or larger agricultural associations. When braceros arrived in the U.S., they were faced with extreme exploitation, such as unfair contracts, internal indebtedness, miserable life conditions, child labor, and private police. It was under these conditions that Mexican braceros forged not only a history of agricultural labor, but also became closely associated to the idea of manual labor. Many U.S. companies saw easy access to unskilled cheap labor that could replace their labor shortage and continue high levels of agricultural production. U.S. companies particularly saw Mexican laborers as birds of passage, or temporary workers who could easily return to their home countries. This not only constructed an identity of Mexicans as objects of commerce that could be rented and then disposed of, but served as a basis of justification for their mistreatment. These negative perceptions of Mexicans allowed for the bracero program to become a system where workers were subject to very low wages for performing harsh manual labor, deductions of health insurance, and the constant threat of deportation if they did not perform according to labor quotas. These perspectives also place Mexican braceros outside of the legal, political, and social boundaries of the nation. Different from U.S. companies, small individual farmers actively sought braceros to return to Mexico in order to inflate their own agricultural prices and to get rid of any foreign labor competition. The bigger U.S. companies who were producing high levels of agriculture at the expense of low-wage bracero labor began to deflate the wages of smaller individual farmers. Many smaller farmers in agriculture felt this was driving out their countrymen simply because they refused to work for wages that seemed big to the native Mexicans. The desire for Mexican braceros to return to Mexico was fueled by more than just a need to suppress labor competition, but rather an intense sense of entitlement and legitimacy. The contest over this legitimacy was indeed a clear struggle for domination of who would not only possess economic security, but also have access to the pursuit of the American dream. The American dream powered many Mexican laborers to leave their homes in search of economic opportunity in a foreign land where they knew they would be apt to encounter racial and social prejudice. The majority of Mexican braceros were men, which often promoted the assumption that Mexican laborers were always single and without families. This definitely was not always the case. Many Mexican braceros had immediate families whom they would send their wages earnings or visit during off-seasons. Under the official agreement of the bracero program, Mexican workers were to be guaranteed protections with respect to housing, transportation, food, medical needs, and wage rates. Mexican braceros soon realized that many of these protections would not be validated due to the discriminatory perceptions their U.S. employers had of them. Braceros recognized that they were seen as inferior, but felt that the bracero program was one of their limited options to gain entrance to economic opportunities. They also recognized that their labor was crucial in maintaining the agricultural sectors of the Southwest, and that taking on this role would have guaranteed them social legitimacy within the U.S. Unfortunately, agricultural companies or small individual farmers' conceptions of Mexicans as inferior prevented them from seeing braceros as anything beyond the cheap and unskilled labor they provided. The constructed image of Mexicans as subhuman creatures placed them outside the realm of humanity and into a distinct and separate category of otherness, which denied them access to the American dream. Though the bracero program officially lasted only 22 years, it not only brought nearly 4 million Mexicans to the agricultural sectors of the U.S., but also left both social and economic effects that continue to intersect with the U.S.'s present history. The story of the braceros is not just one exclusive to Mexican workers, but a history that was forged by U.S. agricultural companies, small individual farmers, and most importantly, Mexican laborers. Who was granted social legitimacy and access to the American dream was a burning question throughout the duration of the bracero program that continues to be asked today in respect to minority and immigrant groups living in the U.S. Through understanding the story of the bracero program, we as historians can begin to construct answers to dilemmas of social exclusion and inclusion.
Ni amigos ni palancas en migración, pero me colé con resolución. Recorrí varios estados.